You see through my eyes as I slowly raise my head to gaze across an expanse surrounding the platform upon which I stand. Lightsabers, one red, one blue, rest in my hands. Liquid energy crackles across them. I ready myself for what is to come. A song begins to echo through the chamber, and suddenly blocks, pulsing with red and blue light, fly towards me. In a single motion, I slice them both in half. Lyrics begin to flow from their distant source. I've been living in another world. I step to the side, and my saber cuts through 2 blocks. I've been living free. 2 more. I don't know what to do or say, but I know what I need. I duck under a giant wall and drag my blades through as it passes overhead. The song continues to play. My blades meet each projectile in perfect time. The beat begins to pick up, and the blocks begin to fly faster. My cuts are precise, each motion flowing into the other. The song lulls for a moment, and I feel every muscle in my body tense. I would not fail this time. Suddenly, an eruption of bass and dozens of blocks rush for me at unprecedented speeds. For the briefest of moments, I grasp hold of a piece deep within me. This time, I would win. You sit on the couch watching with rapt attention as I swing my arms in a wild, idiosyncratic manner. A muffled song reaches your ears and you find that you can't look away from my head, laden with a VR headset as it jerks and bobs for seemingly no reason at all. Without altering your gaze, you nudge your friend beside you. Do you think he knows how stupid he looks? Your friend shakes his head without taking his eyes off me. Nope. In case you didn't catch it, that's all about playing Beat Saber in VR, which I've got to say is one of the coolest things I've experienced in ages. Though granted, while you do feel like a beast when you're the one doing it, if you're watching someone else play, it looks like 99% less cool. So yeah, I got to play some VR for the first time since the last live email, and with real VR, by the way, not like those cardboard phone holders. Since Neo bought a headset, and yeah, that was pretty darn cool. So having clarified that, I'll dive into what's been happening in the life bestowed upon me. Let's see. After finishing the last live email, I helped my dad with some work in the yard. And then I watched a movie called Salt with Mom and Ben, which was not amazing, but not horrible, I guess. Later that day, I also read some more of my psychology book and took notes. The next day, I worked in the front yard some more, helped Mom clean the kitchen, worked on getting Shadowstone edited. Gosh, editing that book takes ages. Then after that day, I indulged myself in a short rollerblade and finished my other psychology book, Emotional Intelligence. The following morning, I did more yard work, finished all the appendixes for Emotional Intelligence, in which I got all the quotes from Emotional and Social Intelligence transferred to another doc, which is about 300 quotes in all. And then I organized them by topic, which took a good chunk of time. It was also upon this day, me and Grace watched the last episode of Psych. They're like 8 seasons, so it was pretty monumental. And then I also rollerbladed to City Park and sat on the hill, just thinking and praying. The day, whatever day of the week came next, I decided to go on a run, and I ran 2.6 miles in 20 minutes, so not bad. I then did some online school, which is always fun. I then rollerbladed some, and later that day I watched Lego Movie 2, which I hadn't seen until then. And I heard it wasn't that good, but I like it mostly. Oh, and gosh, the catchy song in that movie, literally called Catchy Song, got solidly stuck in my head. I think over the following days I listened to it on repeat like 20 times. Also, I had once heard that if you listen to a song, it'll get unstuck from your head if you keep listening to it, but I can now attest that's just flat out a lie. I seriously listened to that song at least 7 times on repeat and remained very much lodged there. I spent the rest of the day editing Esoteric Destiny, the novel I wrote when I was 16, and repeatedly telling myself that my past novel, and repeatedly telling my past self that it was the worst idea that you should write a whole novel of just one block of text. All of the grammar was trash, like the spelling, the punctuation, ugh. Yeah, thanks a lot, younger me. The following day I had more school. I began work on the paper summarizing all the stuff I found really interesting from Goldman's 2 books, being sure to incorporate his citations and quotes. I also spent like 3 hours talking through Discord to Matt and Alan, which was a really good conversation. And that night, Dad brought home a drunk guy. Yep, I was sitting comfortably in my chair, like, I don't know, at 9-ish, working on my paper, and Dad walks through the door and is like, "Hey!" Well, this is a quote. "This is Aaron. He's drunk." And I will inform you that he was thoroughly drunk. We later found out this was his first time getting drunk, and so it occurred when he drank an entire bottle of whiskey to drown his sorrows. So we now had this guy, Aaron, who was of a lighter build and turned out to be Israeli, careening through our house with very little control of his limbs. So Grace, for some inexplicable reason, freaked out. Like, she ran to the basement and basically bawled. And then Dad and I just took turns talking to him until Dad went down to the basement to try and sort out the whole Grace debacle. So naturally, recognizing it's not every day a super drunk guy stumbles into your house, I took the opportunity to learn some things about the nature of drunkenness. What I found particularly peculiar was he was able to remember a great deal of the periodic table, but not where his house was. So I'm not really sure how that works. Also, he was able to do some math, though when I asked him if he could tell him what 11 times 14 was, he said that was too hard. And now that I think about it, like, it probably doesn't indicate much, is that probably anyone would say that, drunk or not. However, he was able to tell me what 11 times 12 was, which is usually within the range of the things that people memorize, unlike 11 times 14. So that was interesting. I also inquired of his IQ, which he said was 140. So if this was a technical genius, this is what technical genius looks like super drunk, I have firmly decided I do not want to see what an average person is like. But it was interesting. I got to learn about his life, and I probably shouldn't share that, but perhaps more importantly, I discovered alcohol is a really effective way of getting people to be raw and honest. Of course, I would never use that fact to my advantage. You see me mixing copious amounts of vodka into a cup of soda. Why don't you have a drink and we can talk about it? Pushes the cup closer to you. Anyway, what I did find interesting and certainly concerning about the whole encounter, though, was how impaired his functioning really was. I mean, if it's the case that substance can impair one's faculties of reason to such a great degree, first of all, why on earth would you drink it? What can be said about a person's, like, culpability and personhood in such a state? Like, say you somehow intoxicated me and I made some really stupid decisions. Would it be me making the decisions? And if so, could I really be said to be culpable for them? On the one hand, I'm inclined to say no, at least to the latter. But from the research I did, alcohol simply diminishes your ability to impair what you want to do. It doesn't actually change your base desires. Hence, it seems as if when one is really drunk, one could view it as one's true self, and that they're no longer culpable for inhibiting themselves. Thus, it seems as if you really ought to be considered culpable to a pretty high degree, at least at first blush. But in the end, I don't know, regardless of the answer to those two questions, I'm definitely planning on getting it drunk approximately never. So yeah, I talked to him for a while. Then Dad and I walked him around a bit until I finally convinced Dad that he was going to be okay. So we left him at the park around midnight, and as he was beginning to sober up. And yeah, now we're friends with him. The following day consisted of more school and more work on what would eventually become my longest paper. Also, I went on a 13-mile blade that day, which was honestly pretty great. I don't know what it is, but going out on blades by myself and listening to music is just so refreshing and awesome. However, at the end of that one, my legs were kind of like, ouch, 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 and so on. Then that night, I talked to Elkin and William from New Zealand. In the past, I haven't said their names, but given I say everyone's names, I'm just going to do that. The next day, I got a pair of nice headphones I ordered, which were like $100, and they were pretty fancy. I figured, considering how much I listen, I was sitting in my corner listening to music as I write, which I'm doing precisely at this moment, I had better get something nice, and that would last me a while. So yeah, got those, and spent a pretty big chunk of the day working on the psychology paper. Oh, and I guess I also watched a movie with the fam, which was just dumb. Other than that, though, at the end of the day, I had finally gotten through my rough draft of the paper, and that was almost done. And since then, at this point, my brain was like, extends hand feebly, no more papers. So I went on rollerblade after it just rained. So that was nice and cool, and the rain smell was still in the air. And gosh, I love that smell. The following morning, I finished the final draft of my psychology paper, aside from more minor editing details, and then I spent some time at the Wade's house, where we didn't do a whole lot, to be honest. And then finally, I went over to Neo and City's house and saw them both again, which was great. Turns out social distancing makes you appreciate having friends more. Who would have thunk? So yeah, that was really good. Oh, and also City was kind enough to cut my hair, because I had gotten pretty darn bad. And she did a pretty darn good job, as far as I could tell. The next day, I went on a run and did 2.4 miles in 20 minutes, so meh. I then did more online school and ordered the last, and for the once not aired, copy of Shadowstone, which I just received. Oh, because I just received another messed up copy in the mail. I really need to work on taking more time before printing these, because seriously, my mess would cost me a ton of money at this point in time. Anyway, here's the pic. It's not too bad. I forgot to resize the image. That's why the titles are not centered and stuff. So yeah. After I got that, I decided it was about time I brushed up on my history philosophy memorization, so I took a 3-hour walk and got through testing myself by about half of it. The following day consists of more school and more yard work. There was this guy who did his PhD on Molinism who came to speak via Zoom at Ratio Christie, so I figured I'd better educate myself on the subject, since I planned on telling him he was wrong. So I read through the Internet Encyclopedia article on the subject, as well as sourced through JSTOR, and the talk rolled around, and I was actually pretty disappointed. I mean, it was clear he knew what he was talking about, but he kind of shrugged off our objections, at least the higher level ones. That, or he gave a rehearsed answer that sort of moved on, and we couldn't really voice an objection. So yeah, I still don't think Molinism works, though I was halfway hoping he would convince me otherwise, because having free will would be a pretty big bonus. After that, I bladed a bit and read a scholarly article Alan sent me, which, I'll be honest, I only sort of understood. The following morrow dawned, and I decided to go on a run and got a whopping 32-minute 5K, which is trash. But for all my failures in athletics, I did succeed in the intellect. I went on another one walk and finally finished my self-tested history of philosophy quiz, finding out that of the 579 facts I ought to have memorized, I was able to recall 471. Thus, I retained approximately 81% of the facts, which, while a low B and not the best grade, isn't too bad all things considered. I also later that day talked with Matt and Alan, and that was again really good. And I finally watched the Pirates of the Caribbean for the first time with my family. So that was pretty good. The next day was more school. I then proceeded to go on yet another long walk and attempted to memorize the facts from the paper I wrote on psychology from Daniel Goleman's books. I then watched Pirates of the Caribbean movie 2 with the fam and drove to a park to meet Caleb, Jake, and Joe for the first time in ages. So that was good. I spent the next 3 hours or so regurgitating all psychology facts memorized, which I'm convinced some found more interesting than the others. But either way, it was good to see them again. And it was also good to find out I'm pretty effective memorizing this sort of stuff. On the other hand, what happened is I had to take my New Zealand necklace off for the first time in a year and a half to fix it. Understandably, the string had worn down considerably, so I guess my streak is technically broken, but I'm going to ignore that technicality. The following period of 24 hours consisted of me reading a book recommended to me by rational Christie leader Noah called The Fourfold Gospel Hypothesis, which I found fairly convincing and now subscribe to. I took some books over to the Myers house and then played some soccer with them, at which point I realized I needed to be much less of a couch potato. And then somehow both Seth and Karina rolled their age for their birthday present. I think I've talked about this earlier, right? Like, half of the Myers family, I have them roll a 20-sided die for their birthday present. If they get the age, then they get $100. Well, anyway, they both got their age. So now I'm down $200. But I mean, honestly, at least for Seth, it was totally worth it. He was super excited. And as for Karina, yeah, I don't think she cared much. But hey, a deal's a deal. That night arrived, and I talked to Alan for like 3 hours. During that time, and after talking it through, I have been wondering if I've been using abductive reasoning improperly because concerning my free will convictions. I mean, sure, there are real and serious concerns I have with the feasibility of the libertarian free will hypothesis, but as Alan pointed out, a Thomistic conception of free will doesn't really share those, and it's the only really good reasons I have for not doing it is I don't like it says weird things, like non-competitive causation. In the same time and same sense, and that Leibniz's conception of the principle of sufficient reason is wrong. But if you really think about it, is this, theory is weird worse than everything's determined? I mean, like, everything being determined has some pretty hard to deal with implications, I'm not going to lie. So I'm wondering if perhaps I'm holding a Thomistic conception of the will to a standard that my own beliefs don't meet, and if I should give up on trying to find the perfect answer and just settle for one that's at least not that bad. So yeah, it was a good conversation, and it's definitely brought me closer to abandoning the particular conception of free will, or lack thereof, that I hold. The next morning I woke up late. I spent some time writing an improved no good reason to be a naturalist paper. I then proceeded to see one of my oldest friends from grade school for the first time in like 8 years. Her name is Molly, and as far as summaries go, I think the word enthusiastic would probably work well. There are times in which I question her sanity, but thankfully that's only about 25% of the time. The other 75%, she's got to be pretty convinced she's sane. But no, it was really good catching up with her and her mom again. She's pretty cool, and it was interesting to see how she stayed the same, and yet changed after all these years. The really important thing from that reunion, however, is she invited me and Ben, though Ben was like, puts on a motionless face, no, to go hiking with this group, which, as you'll later find out, I end up doing. But yeah, after that night, we watched the next Pirates of the Caribbean movie, In the Line. Honestly, I think this was the last one that could be considered okay. They started getting repetitive and kind of meh. The following day, I will finish my Four Gospel Hypothesis book, and Dad cut the internet wire. Yeah. He justifiably thought it was an old irrigation pipe since it looked like that, but nope, it turns out that was the source of our internet. So yeah, that was quite unfortunate. I then hung out at Neo's, and we just talked and hung out, which was good. Thus, being sleep deprived from the previous time spent at Neo's, I proceeded to sleep through my alarm to do a video chat, which I hate when that sort of thing happens. I highly dislike it when people waste my time, so when I waste others' time, it's particularly vexing to me. Other than that, I read a good deal in my next book, the one given to me by my old coworker who studied philosophy, called The Philosopher's Toolkit. After that, my final copy of Shadowstone arrived, and I'm genuinely relieved to have the debacle done, and to finally have a correct copy of my novel. Here's a pic of that on my wall. I know, it's odd to put, a book on the wall, but I'm fine with that. The other thing that happened was my Uncle Dusty came over and ate dinner, and we also got the internet again. It turns out that there was a second internet cable attached to our house, so we just switched our modem to that one. The next day, I worked on Esoteric Destiny. I met up with Aaron, the drunk guy, and joined in Rational Christie conversation for about 5 hours. And I don't know when this happened, but I also saw a bunch of, goslings that I found mildly interesting. Boop. The following day was pretty darn great. I got to experience VR at Neo's for the first time, which was so cool. I then got to play some soccer and brought Benj along, but unfortunately he dislocated his pinky finger while playing goalie. Then later that night, the whole family watched the new Aladdin movie, and then I took an hour or so to walk around the deserted CSU, listening to music with my sweet new headphones, and man, that was great. The next morning was a bit of a sad one. I was called back to work and therefore stopped getting my $600 a week for unemployment benefits for doing nothing. A single tear falls. After work, I finished the Philosopher's Toolkit, took notes on the book, and then my family watched Frozen 2, which was meh at best. After that, I proceeded to go on yet another late night walk. The next day, I got sucked into one of those philosophy comics. Seriously, the funniest thing I think I've ever read. I wish you guys had the background knowledge to get them, because then you would understand them and find them as funny as I do. But I guess I can show you the one that you might understand. So yeah, I think ones like that are great, and I've started reading those a lot while I eat. The other thing that happened that day was more work. I proceeded to start this tome of a philosophy book, of which here's a pic. It's like 600 pages or something, so it's going to take me a bit. But I'll be honest and say that I was surprised that... But I'll be honest and say I was surprised with stuff I've already learned. Oh, okay. So far it's proved to be more informative than I thought it would be. Later that afternoon, I watched the other Pirates of the Caribbean movie with my family and also talked with William for a while. The next morning, I talked with Alan for like 3 hours. We didn't really reach any conclusions. I spent a good chunk of time with Josiah before my car had difficulties. Yeah, we were waiting in line at the human being, and the car just started really jerking, and the check engine light started flashing. So I looked it up, and the first thing that pops up is like, if the check engine light is flashing, stop driving now. So I was like, oh shoot. And I chugged off the side of a nearby parking lot, fearing major engine failure of some sort, as the flashing check engine light apparently indicates a more severe problem. So I tried to call Mom to pick me up, and Josiah, but Ben had her phone in the basement and was using it to animate, hence no one picked up. Thus, after a few times, I ended up buying Josiah and I an ice cream sandwiches, and we walked home. We were only like a few miles away. So yeah, other than that, my time hanging with Josiah was pretty good. I always like talking with him because he actually knows a good deal of philosophy, so it's less me explaining stuff and more of a dialogue. But yeah, we walked home and talked some more on our walk, and then Mom drove Josiah home. I got my car towed back to the house, and then decided I would do my best to wait until my mechanically inclined Uncle Dusty came and was able to scan the codes and figure out what was wrong with it. So yeah, that was a bit of a bummer. But other than that, the rest of the day consisted of the final Pirates of the Caribbean movie and talking with Jordan until 1:30 at night. That's not true. It's 11:30 at night. Sunday morning, I worked on my philosophy book and learned how to formally evaluate if an argument is valid, as well as to read booleans, which I'm going to say is really useful in the future, because when you're reading scholarly articles, they start laying out their arguments in booleans, and you're always like, what do these little symbols mean? But yeah, at Neo's later that day, we played our first D&D session in ages, which was great. Amy brought these fancy chalices, which she filled with sparkling water and some purple grape juice to simulate wine, and also a bunch of food. So here's some pictures of that. And then we did our first Bible study in ages, which was satisfactory. Then we all took turns playing Beat Saber on Neo's VR, did some dishes, and then played a game of Small World, which I won. The next day I skipped work because my boss said all he cared about was that I get in 15 hours a week, and spent the entire day with Neo. I went over to his house at 8. We walked around and talked. We played some Halo, then some VR. Then we went out and got food. Came back, watched some YouTube videos while we ate. Played a game called Civilizations. Played some more VR, then rounded out with a firefight in Halo, in which he crushed me, but I don't need to talk about that. So yeah, all told, there was like a solid 10 hours there, and it was a great time, even if we had less deep conversations. The next day, because my car was still down for the count, I decided to blade the 5 miles to work. Coughs. That was a mistake. Yeah, it turns out some roads are really rough and covered in gravel, so not the best to blade through. I tried to go pretty fast, so I made the whole trip in 22 minutes, which isn't bad. But my ankles were super tired by the end. My feet felt like they'd fallen asleep from the rough roads. So yeah, not doing that again. But other than that, I worked a 4-hour day that day, and Mom took me home and got me a Big Mac to end it out. I then spent some time reading some more of that philosophy book. My Uncle Dusty came over for dinner and diagnosed my car, discovering I had a bad oxygen sensor. Those car readings are super cool and useful. Car readers are super cool and useful, so I ended up ordering one. Thus, I took my parents' car and went and bought the replacement part I needed. Oh, and the other thing is this guy from Master Christie, Liam, way back offered to draw pictures of us, and of course I said yes. And that night he finally finished them. I personally thought mine looked pretty cool, so I went and printed it out and put it on my wall, though I think the one Esther drew for me is still a bit cooler. Here's a pic. Look at me in my fancy armor and cool sword. Now all I have to do is really look at that. Now all I have to do is really look like that. So yeah, I got home and got that printed, and then we talked through Zoom for an hour or so or more. The following day, I rode with Mom to work. I did a 5-hour day. I read a tiny bit of my philosophy book before driving my car to the Wade's house to get repaired. Thankfully, I got there all right. And yeah, David had put it up on their lift and helped me replace the part. And we got it back up and running. Here's a picture of that. So yeah, I think that the whole repair process went well, and my car's been running fine since then. Although 3 of my 5 windows, yeah, I mean, 5, I have a skylight who won't roll down anymore, so that's kind of lame. Oh, 5, I have a skylight. They won't roll down anymore, so that's kind of lame. But at least, they got stuck rolled up. I then helped the fam a bit with laying the stones for the patio we were building. And that night, I watched most of the recent Star Wars, which was mad best. The next day, I worked for 6 hours so I could meet my quota and have Friday off, since Molly had invited me to go hiking that day with some of her friends. And then I got to play some soccer, but there were only 3 of us in total, so it wasn't that amazing. I then went on a late night grocery run with Mom to stock up for the big hike happening the next day, and then I went to bed. The next morning, I got up at like 6:45, drove to the Miller's house, that's Molly's last name, where we carpooled to a school before driving up the canyon to where we were going hiking. However, before we got there, we stopped for cinnamon rolls at a local place, but I didn't save a place in line, so I had to wait for a while before I actually got any. As for the people on the hike, this time Molly was the only girl, and there were 6 of us other guys. I was acquainted with 2 of them, one guy, Cable, who played soccer with me in my 8th grade year, and another guy named Alex, which quickly got confusing and annoying, who used to go geocaching a lot with Ben in his younger days. The other guys, Chris, AJ, and a tall guy whose name I can't remember. The other guys were Chris, AJ, and a tall guy whose name I can't remember. So yeah, out of all those people, the only important thing to note is Cable may be more insane than Molly. Actually, that's likely the case. He's also a bit stocky and and the kind of guy that could totally plow you over. AJ is the unofficial social leader, who reminds me a lot of Hayden back in New Zealand, actually, and I speculate him to be an ISTJ. And then Alex is a cool guy, but I don't know if he has any big defining features. So yeah, we all ate cinnamon rolls, and then hopped back in the cars and began our hike. All told, the hike was 13 miles, and a good bit of elevation gain, so not easy, but certainly not too hard. Well, at least for me at this time. You see, the whole friend group works together landscaping, and apparently they just finished like a week of 4 12-hour days, so they were pretty darn sore. Which, now that I think about it, kind of concerns me for my condition next hike, as if they could keep up with me when they were actually sore, how am I going to keep up with them when they feel fine? And I'm really sore from soccer like the day before. Yeah, this might go badly in the future. But yeah, the hike was good. I ended up rambling to AJ about all kinds of stuff for like a solid 2 hours. I think he enjoyed it, but I'm not totally sure. The group definitely isn't an intellectual one, but in some ways that's good. First, because it makes me seem super smart instead of just kind of smart. Glad I don't care about how people perceive me. And second, because I think I need to get out of my intellectual bubble and talk to people who are, pretty darn different from me. So yeah, I spent basically the whole time alternatively talking to AJ or Alex, or just listening. It amazes me the sort of meaningless and completely random things people talk about and find interesting. But hey, like I said, this is why I need to hang out with these kinds of people. So yeah, we made it to the top and ate lunch. And here's a picture of that. And here's a picture of the view from the summit. And then, upon chilling at the top for a while, we then began the hike down. Yet, by the end of it, my feet were pretty sore because I wore tennis shoes. And aside from the back of my legs being sunburnt, I felt pretty good. We then drove back to Molly's house, where she and her mom hosted bonfire night for the first hike of hiking club season. I mostly listened, because the around the fire conversation consists of like 95% small talk. But that night, I did beat Molly in Dutch Blitz. Though I did lose to another girl by like 4 points in the end. But that's okay, because I beat Molly, and that's what matters. Among other things that happened, I got to know one of the girls who didn't come on the hike, but is usually a regular, Bella, and that was cool. And it was decided that the color that best represented me was a steel gray, which, hey, I'm cool with that. Here's a picture of the bonfire and Molly and AJ dancing. I still don't get the appeal of dancing, like, at all. But yeah, left there around 10 and got home around 10:30, making the whole endeavor around 16 hours. So definitely a full day. And that, my friends, brings us to today. Today I sit in a chair. You gape in awe. Wow, Alex, you sit in a chair? You're so awesome. I nod. I know. Thank you. I am so awesome. And then, wait for it, I wrote. Your jaw drops. No way. I try and calm you down. I know, it's hard to believe, but today I actually wrote something. Although, I did take a break to go see Sam for his birthday party and also talk with Joe and Jake, which was a so-so conversation. But yeah, then this moment came where I actually finished my life update email and get this, stopped writing. There you have it, folks. The life of Alex Treat as of the last few weeks. I hope you found the email tolerable and that you've had some awesome times on your own end of the world. Talk to you next sometime.